We're live? Okay. Welcome, everyone. This is the great world famous internet television show, Toltec Discussions with Golden Eagle. I'm your host, Golden Eagle, and we are discussing um, the conversation we had before the conversation. We were talking in part about our own impediments to progress and why we sabotage ourselves. And that's a nice little segue into some of what we were going to talk about tonight, which is we're going to be talking a little bit about consciousness and the Toltec work in the practical day-to-day things. We've spent a couple of months working on Toltec history, the basic core of Toltec philosophy. Now we're putting that into practice with the goal of making this progress. Oops, get that out of the way temporarily. Of climbing the tree of life. We're starting here in Malkuth, the physical world. We want to get our consciousness systematically up the tree of life. And when we do that, we're making contact with these higher planes, and we're tapping into that information that exists on what we came here to do, our true will, not true wants. Oh, I want a nice cup of tea. Oh, I'll sell my soul for a nice cup of tea. Well, I don't have to because I have. But yeah, there's the physical wants. What's interesting and pleasurable and what most people put on their bucket list. Oh, if only I could go to this exotic location and see that exotic waterfall once in my life, then I'll be happy. If only my favorite team would win the Super Bowl at least once in my life, then I could die happy. And it finally happened. It only took 38 years for my favorite team when I was growing up to win the Super Bowl, and it didn't change my life at all. And after that, I went kind of, So that consciousness, when we get our consciousness up there, we make that link, we learn what it is we're supposed to do and how to do it, and we bring that information back here. When we turn the tree of life upside down, which I'll do in a minute, up here beyond the veils that are above Kether, we have the great unknown, or what we call in Toltec philosophy the Nawal. And the universe goes through this process of creation to conspire to create Malkuth, the physical world. This is what the divine is trying to create. And there's too many systems of philosophy that say, oh man, we got to get out of this physical world. It's dense, it's corrupted, so we got to get back to those divine levels. Well, that's where we were before we came here. We didn't have to come at all if we just wanted to be there, but we're here on a mission. And so when you look at building the universe from the foundation up, the divine starts here. Malkuth is at the top. That's why it's called the kingdom, right? That's what we're all trying to create. So kind of mentally turn that over in your thought process sometime. And a lot of what passes for quote unquote higher spiritual phenomenon isn't high at all by the definition of the tree of life. You find people who are really good at some of the psychic phenomena. So the intuitive psychic world over here in Nitzak, and the path of the moon here, which is the beginning of the feminine path. This is why women naturally have an advantage for doing the intuitive work, because that's their path up this green pillar here. Men, on the other hand, are more mental. The descending pillar over here is the male energy, and it comes down here for Hod, which is the core of our mental processing, and this direct link through judgment, the path of judgment, we're receiving that information all the time. Most of us men, a lot of men, don't realize that. And this is kind of what we were talking about earlier tonight. Sorry you all couldn't be part of that conversation. That of how to discern what's divinely inspired, what's coming from God, what's coming from our holy guardian angel, what's coming from our essential self, and what we're making up out of the myriad of data bombarding us from society in our either our conscious or subconscious minds. So this path of judgment, men have a reputation for being quick to judgment. Off with his head, right? Sometimes they need it, but sometimes they don't. So this path of judgment is a direct link to the mental sphere, right? Down here. So we do that naturally, we don't even realize it. Women do this naturally and they don't even realize it. And we then turn around and get mad at each other for doing what we naturally do well. And that's problems being compounded in society today by women trying to be men, men trying to be women, and having this lack of understanding is that the goal is for all of us to develop all these skills. Men, we need to develop our intuition. That was hard. It's like, get the big wrench. Squirt some WD-40. Oh, I feel much better now. Right? That's kind of what I had to go through. So we have to develop our intuition, and it's not natural for us. It's part of what some of the beginning level spiritual movements will describe as, oh, if it makes you uncomfortable, it's not good, so don't go there. It's like, no, you got it, men. We got to go here. We got to turn on that intuition. We got to balance that left brain and right brain. And if that means getting out the big wrench and the big WD-40 can, then that's what we got to do. Now, women, you've got to balance over here. You've got to open up to that downward current, that mental current of judgment. And it's not just judging the world around us or the people around us as being good or bad. When you hear judgment, you should also think discernment, right? Here's 50 pieces of data coming in. Which ones are important? Which ones should I act upon? So that's the path of Shin, also known as judgment. And I think in the modern Crowley deck, it's art, if I remember right. Here, path of Tao, or the world or the universe, is this first step up to Yesod, the next sphere up, which is the etheric and at least the lower half of the astral plane. There are some who would say the upper half of the astral plane is over here, and that's probably true. There's not a one-to-one correspondence between the higher planes and the lower planes, or the higher planes and the tree of life, excuse me. So in terms of the Hebrew alphabet that starts up here, Aleph, Beth, and so on, going down through, this is the last letter. This is the last path. This one got put in place first, then this one, then this one, right? So this is the last one before the kingdom. And the world, the universe, it's sort of like the summation of everything, if you want to think of it that way. So the first step up from Malkuth to Yesod is the path of what I'm trying to say is, there's that old Chinese adage, the journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. Another translation says, begins with the ground beneath your feet. And It's sometimes the hardest step because it includes everything. Sort of like you've got to like reverse integrate everything to get up here to Yesod. Yesod being the astral plane, it's being where we tap into that world of archetypes. As we go from that causal plane to the mental plane, to the astral, to the etheric, to the physical. That's one of those key planes where we have to decide what we're creating. So taking our conscious back up there is that it's kind of like going up Niagara because everything's coming down here. And so there's like that salmon swimming upstream effect. You're swimming through everything to get here.
Is that why maybe the first step on a real spiritual path is so difficult? You know, in other words, because really you think you've had all these experiences and so forth, and really what we're doing is creating that foundation in Malkuth. But because we think that's our highest level experience, it seems like, you know, we think we're already doing that when in fact we haven't even really started.
That's part of it. There is definitely a physics slash structure of the universe aspect to this step. There's the salmon swimming up the big waterfall. Part of it, though, has to do with the socialization that takes place when we are born into a culture, into a society, and we're trained to think a certain way. And most cultures on the earth today are not teaching this from the get-go. I mean, even the Hebrew culture, who did the world such a service by maintaining this knowledge all these thousands of years, maintaining the Kabbalah, maintaining the Tree of Life, maintaining this figure that we all refer to because it is the best map of the universe we have today. They didn't start teaching this until age 40. And then only from first son to first son, and only in the priesthood caste. So even the Hebrew culture, most people never were taught this. And that socialization is that, oh no, you're not seeing auras. You're not talking to your invisible imaginary friends. They really aren't there. But wait, I see them. Oh no, you don't. Yes, I do. No. Well,
it's the devil.
Don't. Maybe I'm making that up. Okay, I'll ignore it. And that's how it happens on every little point of the higher spiritual world. This other path here that I've referred to, this is the path of the moon, path called Qoph, Q-O-P-H, is the usual Americanized English spelling of the Hebrew letter that corresponds here. And please forgive me if my pronunciation is incorrect. This is the path of the moon from the Tarot. This is the beginning of the feminine path. This is the path of intuition. And this is the path of nighttime and that nighttime meditation. So when we're turning on our intuitive side at 3 a.m. and we wake up from our dreams, this is the path we're most utilizing at that point. And Nitzak. So here we have our emotional center, our mental center. This is more intuitive, with the caveat that those are gross oversimplifications. When you look at any of the references, such as on our reading list, there will be many pages written about each of these spheres in each of the 4 worlds that aren't even drawn on here. This is Shin, Tau, and Ka. And those 3 consonants are the basis of the Hebrew word for rainbow. So in the different mythological literatures, the different esoteric philosophy literatures, when you hear about the rainbow bridge leading from this world to the higher worlds, that's what they're referring to. Is these are the three paths. These are the only three paths out of your consciousness in the Malkuth, in the physical world. So the Thor movies, they have the rainbow bridge, right? You've probably seen them. You've probably seen them. That's what they're talking about. Yes, it's not this little thing, magic technology that he turns on and off and extends the drawbridge for people to go up and down. We have to do that ourselves. We're the only ones who can activate this. I can't do yours or yours or yours or anybody else. You have to do that. So this is the map of the higher consciousness. And as you were mentioning, we think we're up here in Kether, and we're really just sampling what's coming down here. Occasionally, especially in the dreaming, we get up to Yesod, we get up here, we get up here. So we're at most up to here, at this level, unless we've done the conscious specific work to take our consciousness higher. And that's what this work is getting us ready to do, is to go up to here, 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 in the reverse order that the universe was created. So what's one of the logical questions that can be asked when you start looking at this? I start talking about the higher planes and overlaying on the map of the universe. What's one of the logical questions that we can ask about this whole spiritual side of the universe? Everything from here up.
How do you determine what to do with it? What path to take?
That's close. Even more fundamental.
Why? Why do it at all?
That's the other side of the coin. It's how do we know it's there? How do we know it's even there? How do we know we're not just making this stuff up? And so there's actually a really good trail of logic that's going to walk us through that. And this is this book I've been harping at you for 6 months or more. The Human Biological Machine as a Transformational Apparatus by E.J. Gold, a wonderful shaman based near Grass Valley, at a secret location in a secret compound under a secret mountain in Northern California, somewhere, which I can't reveal to you.
Have you guys started reading that at all?
Young Mr. Bodenstein has. I don't know if you have.
I downloaded the ebook. Does that count?
That counts. Yeah, it doesn't have to be the hard copy.
Yeah.
Now, one of the things I found out this year, which I did not know, is that not every copy, or every edition rather, of EJ's book has the introduction, the 50-page introduction. Really, EJ? 50 pages of introduction? Really?
It's a transcript too, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, and then there's a transcript in here. It's like, yeah, it keeps going and going. So, the introduction is actually a textbook in and of itself for a much bigger picture to put the rest of the book in context. So, I know several people were commenting on the difficulty of getting through the introduction. And because not everybody has the introduction, I think we're just going to skip that, and we're going to do the rest of the book first. And then we'll come back, and I think the introduction at that point will make a little more sense for you. So how many have gotten into chapter 1? Ebook yet? No. I know you have. You've read the whole thing, right?
I've read the whole thing. It's been a while.
It's been a while. But you are aware of the concept. Why don't you regale us with the quick overview of the concept that he starts off with?
Well, he starts out with the story of Redfin the fish, realizing and coming to realization that he's this fish in this fishbowl, and that there's something outside of the fishbowl. and EJ goes through a lot of dialogue kind of with self the same way that we might when we're first spiritually enlightened, that hey, there's something out there, you want to tell everybody, you want them, your friends, to see it and so forth. But then, you know, with all of these potentials, like, okay, well, what if you got everybody to believe that there is something outside of the fishbowl, then what? It's not like you can affect anything outside of it, or that it's really affecting, that knowledge doesn't really change your daily life within the fishbowl. And you know, from there, you end up, you know, making those analogies with, you know, with this fishbowl analogy to your own spiritual experiences, and realizing that you know, at some point, just simply knowing that there is in fact something outside of the fishbowl, whether you can get your friends involved or get them to believe, or whether it really will change your life or not, you know, within this lifetime, it gets you to start thinking about those aspects of what's beyond this reality. And just off the top of my head, I don't know where you're going with you know, the concept that the whole book is supposed to be in.
Yeah, no, that was a good summary. So chapter 1 basically introduces the fish tank, and it describes that within the tank there's different levels. The bottom feeders seldom go up, the top feeders seldom go down, and then there's the middle layer that neither goes up or down, and they don't interact much, and the plants are adapted, and everything's adapted, but it relies on this outside input, the feed coming in. You need the electricity for the circulating filters and the aerators to keep oxygen in the water and all this. And so then what is the theory that the fish will develop if they start paying attention not just to looking at the glass wall in front of them, but looking through it, to changing their perspective, and they see the shapes moving around, and they realize there's something out there that they can't get to, and they can't interact with it. And so that's what we're going to be going through. So one of the things, the starting point, is there's a level of perception that's required, and the hero of the story is a specific fish named redfin. And redfin goes through his awakening by looking at the data that's coming in a new way. He hasn't left a bowl. Nobody scooped him up and put him in a cup and walked him around the room to see all this stuff. He just started perceiving that there's light and dark, that there's shapes moving, and that one of the shapes in particular comes over and feeds him and the other fish, and that this is his first clue that the world he grew up with and he thought this was all there is not all there is.
I think an important point you brought up was this dependence really on what's outside of that.
Yes.
And we don't realize that we are dependent on the sunlight and the, you know, all of the elements and all of the things that come into our fishbowl just to survive. And we have no control over that. And yet we kind of take it for granted. And so I think that's part of the level of awareness, is that we are being fed. But we don't really even realize where that's coming from.
Yeah, we are. We rely on things outside this world. We rely on the sun. And even outside that, there's inputs from beyond. This is everything that we know and is knowable. This is the tonal in the Toltec universe. Beyond that is the Nawal, and they're part of how we know that there is a Nawal, something beyond what is knowable, is because of this same concept that we can infer that, oh, well, food came into the bowl. Where did it come from? It wasn't here a minute ago. Now there's food floating in my bowl. And each day, Redfin notices this dark, amorphous shape come over, and then just before the food appears. And then you have food. And the food never appears unless that shape comes first. And then you realize, oh, I don't see the shape. I'm not going to get fed yet. There's that correlation. It's starting to perceive and use his attention in a new way. Right? So that's the concept.
I was just gonna ask, did the two of you have a pretty good feeling of what the Tenal and the Nual is?
I think so.
Okay, because we went through like a whole 3-month, philosophy course where we discussed this, and it was easier for some people to grasp than others, but because it is specifically one of the Toltec concepts that we work with, that anything that's in the Nual, it's like it will never be knowable. It's not like we just haven't learned about it yet. What we haven't learned about are these upper branches on the tree of life and so forth. This is beyond that. But the way that we know there's something beyond is the reverberations. It's almost like being inside of a big bubble and somebody hits against the bubble, and they're not physically affecting anything inside, and you're not physically doing anything outside, but there's these reverberations from the fact that something bumped up against it. And so you kind of think about that, like with the fish tank. At first, everything's going to be blurred, and you just see these random shapes and stuff. But at some point, if you really start working with it, your eyes adjust, and you can start seeing beyond that. You can't physically affect anything, but in this way, that those shapes are telling you something as they're moving by, and so you never are quite sure 100% of what it is, but you start to see the patterns. Does that make any sense?
Yeah. So there's data coming to us all the time. Somewhere between 90 and 99% of it we ignore. And that's just the data that is available to us in this much limited universe that we've created through our assemblage point and the social constructs that we live with, that says, here's how we define our world and our universe. And the assemblage point is filtering out 90 to 99% of what could be part of our universe. And of that 1% to 5%, let's say, that gets in, we're filtering out 90 to 99% of that. So we're working with maybe 1/10 of a percent to at most 1% of the universe on any given day. We filtered and we filtered some more, and that's what some of these exercises we work with on, just using your physical senses to heighten our vision, heighten our hearing, our sense of smell, our sense of taste, become aware of what we're touching. And then we start to work with the concepts that we have of the etheric body, extending that out. Our sensory body, our perception body, if you want to think of it that way. And to start looking at all this extra data. So if you were to have 2 television sets on 2 different channels and watch them simultaneously, and after 10 minutes be able to recapitulate everything that happened on each channel, that would probably be a challenge, right? Now multiply that by 100 or 1,000, and that's the situation we have. We our conscious minds are very good at focusing on one thing, maybe two at a time. We go through our attention work specifically to learn to do two things at once, and then three. First attention, second attention, third attention, and after that, most people shut down, even after working for years on this. It's hard to go more. But that data is there. And so upgrading our consciousness is basically training us to look at all 100 channels and be able to consciously engage with all 100 channels. So we don't start and go from 1 to 100 in one step. We break it down. First we do 2, then we do 3. Everyone here know that crows can count? They've done experiments, go in a little narrow woodpile, and the crows are flying and calling and flying and calling. And one person walks into the woods, they all shut up. And one person walks out, they start playing again. So now they're playing. Two people will walk in, either side by side or one after the other. Either two people, they all shut up. One person leaves, and then the other, or two people leave same time, the crows will start it. And they can do that up to 3. So crows have first attention, second attention, third attention. They can count up to 3. Once more than 3 people walk into the woods, they shut up. And then when 3 people walk out, they start in. They can't count more than that. They can't hold their attention or fathom the idea that they can count more than that. So that's what we're doing with our attention. Most of us shut down at that number 3, and so we're working to take it beyond that. First the first 3, then we'll do the second 3, and so on. And so becoming aware when we meditate in the dreaming of knowing where our thoughts are coming from. Some of my writings, some of my discussions, I've used that concept of whose thoughts am I thinking? Is this me, the biological machine, making this thought? Is that my higher self, which is a construct below the essential self? Is it my essential self? Is it my holy guardian angel or my daemon? And one shoulder the other, trying to smack me upside the head and get my attention? Or is it information from beyond that? Is this the divine sending down a thunderbolt saying, wake the heck up. Pay attention to this. That is a level of discernment and a perception that we have to develop. Realize that not all our thoughts are our thoughts. And learning that discernment is who is thinking that, where is that message coming from? And that's why when we were talking about earlier about the journaling, why the journaling is so important. And especially include some of the day-to-day mundane things, because that's where you will go back over time and find the evidence. Oh man, I had this vague notion I should go over here to this store. I don't even shop at that store. And then you meet a person and you find something you've been looking for that's on their discount sales rack because they shouldn't have been carrying that in the first place, but some manager made a poor decision about a whole bunch of it and nobody who goes to his store is buying it, so he's got it on the sale rack to dump it, right? And it's whatever you've been looking for months. And there it is, right? You start to see those tracks. And then what's the next step? You've looked at your past, you've looked at the history, you've realized you're starting to discern your thoughts from the thoughts of the divine, from the thoughts of your angel. What's next?
Start asking questions.
That could be. Basically, what I'm looking for is you want to start doing that proactively. Predict the future. Recognize, oh, when X and Y and Z conspire and happen, that's not my random thought, that's for real. That's coming in. Whenever I go sit in the backyard and around my own campfire alone at night after dark, that's when I have my best connection. So that's what I often will do. And that's for real. I like to sit around the backyard campfire and I get great stuff that way. So for you, it might be different. For you, it might be different. For you, definitely will be different. But I'm just kidding. It might be the same. You have to know what works for you. You have to learn your own communication system. And you have to learn how to consciously work all three paths out of Malkuth. Question?
As far as looking at, the Rainbow Bridge and that kind of work, it seems like, we need to have that firm foundation in Malkuth, which is to know yourself, which is, I think, is kind of like a lot of what you're alluding to. There's knowing yourself and, your preferences, but then there's all these dialogues. One thing that what we're talking about made me think of is I had to take an acting class one time, and what they were talking about is that for the actor, you need to know who your audience is, and it's not the audience out there, in the theater. It's this world that's been created on stage, and you might be the only person on stage, but in that world, there's people in the next room who might overhear you or whatever. So that's the audience that you're when you're speaking, you're thinking about, oh, these people that might hear you or interact with you. And I kind of internalized that, as a spiritual principle for myself. It's like, well, who's my audience? Who do I really care about what their opinion is? Obviously when you're at work, you have to impress your boss and do what you need to do. But when you're out in the world or, looking for a partner or whatever, it's like, are you going to keep putting on these masks, or is there, a base of who and what you are that you're comfortable with and you're not going to change? So what that was helpful to me was, okay, is this my mom's voice I hear in my head telling me, Bonnie, don't do those kind of things, or good girls don't do that, or good girls don't do this, or whatever? Is that my voice? Is it a voice that I care about? Is it part of the audience that I'm playing to? So that means being awake, seeing the pattern, analyzing where the voice is coming from, whose voice is it, and is it a voice I'm going to listen to? Does that make sense? Because that's kind of the process that I went through, and I still do, on a regular basis. It's like, well, who is that voice? Is that something that I care about?
That's a good description. We're all going to have different ways of doing that and getting to that place of being able to recognize who you're talking to. And that's part of the ladder, of climbing Jacob's ladder, as this whole thing is referred to sometimes, of climbing the tree. And there's a lot of ways we can train our perception. You've heard me talk about music. So I encourage everyone here, everyone watching, if you know a musical instrument, then practice it. If you don't know a musical instrument, learn one. music is one of the universal languages. Music, it's just like math in that way. Math and music are two sides of the same coin. It's all about those frequencies and resonance and vibration, and those pure musical notes can help affect and rewire and develop our brain. So learn to read music, learn to play an instrument. It could be keyboards, it could be drums, it could be flutes, bagpipes, whatever. Organ, the concertina, harmonica, doesn't matter. But that's one of the things that can be done. Learning to develop an awareness and an interaction with and an involvement with all our natural cycles around us. The daily cycles, monthly cycles, yearly cycles of our solar system. That's one of the things we'll be talking about this weekend. And you're not going to be there, and you're not going to be there. You're going to be there
Next weekend?
this coming Saturday, the 19th?
I hope so.
Yeah. And some of you watching online or watching the tape replay will hopefully be there. Because that's some of the powerful techniques that we have for expanding our perception and our awareness. And these aren't going to necessarily be instantaneous, although you have my permission to make instantaneous upgrades and quantum leaps. But for most of us, it takes a while. You start in, and then 2 years later you realize, oh, that's very different now. My whole life, my whole outlook, my whole perception of the universe is different now because of these little techniques. I didn't get a chance to finish the calculation, but one of the analogies I like is, if you're going to sail across the Atlantic Ocean, which is a distance of, say, 3,000 or 4,000 miles, and you're going from point A in Europe to point B in, let's say, North America someplace, and your compass is set 1/10 of 1 degree off. Now that doesn't sound like much, The first week of sailing across the ocean, your error might not be more than the width of your ship. By the time you get 4,000 miles across the ocean, the error can be 100 miles or more on 1/10 of 1 degree. So that's the kind of difference little tiny subtle shifts in your perception can make. Everyone understand how computers like this one here work and talk down at the core level? It's in ones and zeros, right? Bits. And 8 bits make a byte, and each byte makes a number. It could be converted from binary into, which we don't think in very well, into decimal, which is the most common number base that we use. But it's not necessarily the most accurate or most efficient for many calculations, right? How do you write the number 1/3 in decimal? As a for instance, you can't. In base 10 numbering system, you cannot write 1/3. You just get this 0.33333333 going on into infinity, right? It cannot be defined accurately in this numbering system. You need a different number base. So you can do it in binary, you can do it in hexadecimal, which is base 16. You can do it in base 9. But there's this level of accuracy that by choosing our point of view, choosing our perception, we get better results. So you've got these bits that can be converted to numbers. And there's a timing. So the computer has a time signal to know when to start measuring this stream of bits. And so there's a code that comes in, usually a whole bunch of ones and a whole bunch of zeros. So like 8 ones, 8 zeros, 8 ones, 8 zeros. And then that tells the computer the very next bit is where he starts counting to compute the ones and zeros and turn it into whatever English words you're trying to type. If your time signal and your 1, 0, your bits are off by the width of 1 bit, everything becomes gibberish. You can't read it. And these clock cycles are operating at, high speed, right? So that width of a bit is down there in the milliseconds. You're 1 millisecond off, and the whole thing goes to heck in a handbasket. So that's why our perception and our point of view needs to become precise. It's not just what we're looking at, but when and how. And we have these big long cycles, the yearly cycles, as the sun, the earth moves around the sun. In the old days, it was the sun moving around the earth. But then Copernicus came along and we got smart and we, oh no, we're doing it wrong. And then we have monthly cycles. The moon goes around the earth. And then we have these daily cycles, the earth rotating on its axis. And they're all going on all at the same time. And that produces our seasons. And it changes the way our biological machines operate. We have winter. Days get short. We're up at a fairly high latitude. We're almost 45 degrees, which is angularly, we're almost halfway from the equator to the North Pole. That exact crossing point is up in southern Oregon, someplace, central Oregon, somewhere up there, where it's halfway between the equator and the North Pole. And so that means that we have a big difference between the length of the days in the winter and the length of the days in the summer. And so that affects our perception of time. It affects the temperature and the weather and what's growing. And all of that can affect our life. Now it's sort of like the tides, the ocean tides that come in and out, which are partly based on the sun, but mostly based on the moon. And if you try to swim or row a boat against the tide, you get worn out in a hurry. If you learn to go with the natural cycles, things get a lot easier. Rowing a boat, when you want to go across the bay when the tide's flowing out, you get in your boat, the tide's on you. I got to sail with the tide. Out you go. Time to come back in, well, you wait for the tide to be flowing back in, then you come back in. Sailors have been doing this for eons. They knew this. Right? So every one of these natural cycles, the moon, the sun, the stars, the earth, changes the way our body functions. It changes the way we can perceive the universe. There's good times of the day and bad times of the day for doing certain things. If you're working outside on a farm and you need to see what you're doing and you don't want to drive your tractor off a cliff, midnight is probably not the best time to be outside working. Probably not. Might be a good time to go outside and chase bears out of your trash, but it's not a good time to go out and plow your fields.
One thing I have found and observed to be really interesting is the Ayurvedic cycles. I don't know if you guys know much about Ayurveda, but it doesn't. I think it's every 3 hours or so. There's these time frames that change that are best for one thing or another. And when I understood about that, it helped me understand why we wake up at 3 in the morning, wide awake or with dreams or whatever, because that's when one of the shifts happen. But it also explains like why, besides having just eaten lunch and stuff in the mid-afternoon, sometimes we get really sleepy and such, because we're going through kind of a rest cycle. And yet there's other places in the world where they know and realize this, and so they have siestas and so forth, or they shut down all their shops and then they, come out later in the evening when it's cooler. And so all of this has been going on forever, and yet it seems like with all of our technology and all of our knowledge and everything that we have today, we've got even more out of touch with these natural cycles, so that we're almost like fighting them. One thing in particular is like Yuletide, the last two weeks of December, are times when our biological clock, we want to be resting and rejuvenating, just like hibernating and storing all of your energy. And instead, because of our holiday seasons, we're out partying and pushing ourselves and staying out late and getting stressed and buying gifts and all of that kind of stuff. So our culture is completely out of harmony then with these natural cycles. And I guess my point is just that I've been able to see that and observe that myself, not just theoretically.
And that's one of the things we'll be talking about this weekend. And for those of you who won't be there, we'll have a makeup class. And because the two of you won't be there and Cherie will not be back yet. And so we'll do this again. This is important. And when you have an awareness of these natural cycles, and mostly what we're teaching is how to work with them, you can use this for your advantage, just like the ship captain who's trying to sail with the outgoing tide rather than, well, I want to leave at 4 o'clock. Well, that's the incoming tide. It's like, well, good luck with that. It works poorly. So it is the perception. There's 3 interrelated concepts. We've been talking about consciousness. We've been talking about perception. That's your ability to sense and take in information. And then there's a closely related term called awareness. All the data is coming in all the time. You can scan the channels, you can look at them all at once, but you have to be aware that there's a need to do that. You have to be aware that there's more possibilities. You've probably all seen people who, I guess it's the old story about the people who go out in the woods and say, I couldn't see the forest because there was all these trees in the way. They perceive the data that there's trees, but they're missing a higher level awareness of what that meant. On multiple levels, right? Because yes, it is the collection of trees that makes a forest, but then the whole forest is an organism. Just like all of humanity, all these people comprise a humanity organism. We're all cells in the humanity organism. And so when we assess health of our world, We can't just assess the health of each individual. We have to look at humanity as a whole. How is the mental emotional health of our humanity organism these days? This is just another way of perceiving the data, another point of view, another perspective. Is most of humanity behaving in a sound, cognitively sound manner? Or is most of humanity behaving as if they have a mental and emotional illness?
It's like cancerous.
Yeah, there is. A cancer in its single organism are cells who stop cooperating and they start eating to consume all the resources and not playing with the other children. And they do so to the detriment of their host body. Cancers can actually kill themselves, right? But I don't care about playing with anybody else for whatever reason. I'm just going to eat and consume everything, and if that kills everybody, including me, okay. That's what cancerous cells do. Now you look at society. We have organizations, we have individuals who are consuming all our resources when they don't need to, right? You don't have to keep cutting down old growth forests. We can, everything that we want to cut down the old growth forest to, we can do without destroying that. Old growth forest in nature is one of those steady state optimal configurations of a biosphere that nature tries to create is an old growth forest or an old growth tundra or something along those lines. So when we destroy that deliberately, just because it's there, then we've lost that higher perspective. We're behaving in a cancerous way. So this notion that the humanity organism might not be mentally sound right now, might not be, clearly isn't physically sound when you look at the rate at which we're polluting our world, the rate at which we're not taking care of ourselves. You know, if we get an infected toe, most of us say, oh my gosh, if I don't take care of that toe, it could turn gangrenous. I could develop a septicemia that goes throughout the whole body, and that little infected toe way down there could kill me. I better pay attention to that infected toe and bandage it, keep it clean, don't let it get infected, do something to boost my healing ability, do something to fight the infection, and take care of it to prevent the death of my whole body. But when we look around our world right now, that's not what we're seeing. We're seeing infected toes and infected knees and infected elbows. And we're just saying, oh man, I'm glad that's at the other end of the body. I'm up here, and that's down there. And it's only a matter of time. And you try to point that out to people, and they go, you're just a naysayer. You're negative. I can't handle your negativity. Right? Those are the kind of behaviors we're seeing from our policymakers, our leaders. That's a level of consciousness that is not in the best long-term interest of our humanity organism. So what do we do about that? That's more than just a rhetorical question. Anybody, chime in. What are your thoughts?
Try to educate people.
That would be good. What's happening with our education system these days? They're turning it off. They're dumbing it down.
Well, if they were cancer cells, we'd kill them off.
Surgically excise them or poison them with radiation or chemicals.
Well, and seriously though, I mean, we don't just, we kill them off by creating an environment which they can't thrive.
Right.
So
That's the holistic.
yeah, so
approach.
if we're, treating cancer holistically, then we're going to boost our immune system, and we're gonna, create more of an alkaline environment where cancer cells just can't thrive. It's not like we have to go out and kill them off individually.
Right.
So I think like with the Akadua, one of the examples is, okay, you got one bad kid in the classroom, are you going to, zap them with the energy, which isn't ethically correct, but by creating an environment, things that can thrive in that will, and the ones that can't are gonna leave.
So, basically, the question I just asked, which is what do we do to change these self-destructive tendencies and behaviors within the humanity organism, is that, I guess, from the higher spiritual point of view, that is the $64,000 question, for those of you who remember that ancient game show. That is the question at the peak of the pyramid, is what do we do when people, especially people in power, are not playing the game in a manner that's conducive to anybody else? And by the game, I mean life. Probably the best approach, I just thought of this, it just came to me, is to log into Facebook, and every time somebody posts something that's wrong, you just correct them. And you say, oh, by the way, you're totally screwed up and totally wrong, and here's the right answer, and I'm sure that'll re-educate everybody. And oh my gosh, you're right, I'm wrong. And within a day or two, we should have the whole world retrained.
I dissolved a troll this week.
Yeah, that was a fun story. Troll disillusion. You could probably start an internet-based company and get rich. I can make your trolls go away. Seriously though, that is the good question, is what do? We're trying to turn on the big light bulb and attract the people who resonate with that frequency. Right? And like moths to the flame, those who are attracted will come, and those who are repelled by it will go hide under a rock someplace, and hopefully something big will come along and step on that rock. I've been doing some of this work for a long time, not as the leader of a Toltec party per se, but I spent many years working in aerospace with all these very highly logical left-brained rocket scientists and engineers and smart people, and it turned out a lot of them weren't very smart. Well, let's do this thing because it'll say 2 steps over here. Well, the last 4 times we tried that, things blew up and or people died. So maybe we should not do that. Oh, you're just so full of the negative waves. Well, off they go and told you so. Well, now you tell us. And I told you that. I wish I was making this stuff up. Natural medicine, naturopathic profession, cutting edge. We have answers, both old and new, and the holistic model of looking at health, and we can fix a lot of things that the conventional world that's deliberately limited themselves can't. And I was asked at one point to be the president of this state's Naturopathic Medical Association. I did 2 years. I came up with a plan to push the profession forward, the health forward, that involved a slightly audacious plan to eliminate chronic disease by a certain point in time. And the board of directors of the Naturopathic Association, there were about 10 of us, maybe 12, I don't remember. The leaders of the profession, of the leaders of the cutting edge profession, took one look at my proposal and ran away screaming. And I said, wait, guys, come back. Let's talk about it before you run away screaming. Let's go down my points. I had about 8 points. Do you all believe this? Oh, yeah, that's right. Do you all believe number 2? Yeah, that's 3, 4, 7, 8. Great. You believe with 100% of what I'm saying, right? But not a single one of you is willing to say it in public. Well, oh my, look at the time. And out the door they went, figuratively speaking. Couldn't get them on board. Cutting edge. It's like, I can't even wake up the leaders on the cutting edge. And it wasn't even that difficult of a plan. It's like, oh, gee, in 1900, heart disease only existed at 2 to 3% of the population. Here we are in the year 2000, 100 years later, heart disease is over 50% of the population. So what's happened to our humanity organism in the last 100 years? Well, it was environmental toxins, it was bad food, a few other things. So, talking to my naturopathic colleagues, it's like, how many of you, when somebody comes in with heart disease, how many of you correct the diet, you eliminate the vascular inflammation, you do all this stuff, right? Heart disease goes away, right? So let's say publicly that we can eliminate all heart disease, or 90% of heart disease, in 20 years. Oh, no, can't do that. We don't want to, somebody might get mad at us.
Could end up dead.
They could. It has happened before. That, especially in the health world, people on that cutting edge mysteriously die. It's sort of like the way Clinton Foundation staffers mysteriously die over the last 30 years. But we're trying to save humanity, right? We're trying to wake up humanity to transcend. There is a higher level reality to be had. Right now, we could leave here, we could go outside, get in our levitating hovercraft vehicles, and no stuck in traffic, you just bloop using the your onboard free energy device and hovercraft your way home in maybe 2 minutes. Well, we live 60 miles away in Mount Shasta. For us, it would be 5 minutes. That's what is technically possible. That technology is not just on the drawing boards, it's being used right now on this planet. But our conscious awareness collectively is like, that's sci-fi. The unity of humanity is one of the keys for this, is getting people to realize that their success and survival depends on the success and survival of everybody else. It's not just Northern Californians versus Southern Californians. It's, yeah, they steal our water, but all we have to do is teach them that they could use solar power desalinization and they could have all the water they want. They don't need to steal the water up here where 75% of the nation's food is grown. There's this perception, and looking at the Toltec philosophies, that unity of everyone, that everyone and our society as a whole, the true objective is this spiritual transcendence. to transcend the limits of this physical world. And it's not a violation of the laws of physics, it's simply using the rest of the laws of physics. It's like, okay, here's some physics. Oh no, I only want this one. Those other 99, take them away. I got a lot of physics here. Ooh, cool. Ancient Newtonian mechanical physics. Right? What about the, hey, look, see? Quantum physics. Relativity. Chaos theory. 0-point energy. Oh, no, I've got my Newtonian toy here. Yeah, no, I've got it. No, don't take that. That's just going to confuse me. I'll just play with this. Okay. That's what we're doing. Maybe the best way to get people to look at the other 99% of possibilities is to take away the 1% they have. Maybe that's what the purpose is right now out here in society. Oh, I'm sorry, you can't have your car anymore. Oh, well, how am I going to get around? Oh, well, we've got these levitating hovercrafts. You want one of those? They don't pollute. They go really fast. And we have built-in safety mechanisms so they can't collide with anything. Really? Well, when did these come out? Oh, about 100 years ago. Really? Where was I? Oh, you were playing over here with this little Newtonian car that uses friction and burns toxic fuels. There's a conscious change that has to happen in our culture. If humanity is going to go forward. There's no guarantee that it is. Roughly 15,000 years ago, plus or minus 1,000, because all the calendars were burned up in that event, we had a really bad accident that blew up part of the world. And it took a long time, and we're still recovering from that. We are not yet up to the level of consciousness. I'll say more about the consciousness back then in a minute. Or the technology or the level of knowledge that we had 15,000 years ago. Now, obviously, not everything back then was right in the ethical use of consciousness and power. Because they did things wrong that they knew better, and they did them anyway, and things blew up. Not that that would ever happen in this day and age, like every day. So we're trying to get back there. I mean, we're trying to get back to the baseline we had before those ancient civilizations kind of took their left turn down the unethical path. So when we do that, if we get back there, then we can push humanity forward. But there's no guarantee that's going to happen. In fact, you could make a case that there are forces in the world today working very hard to make sure that we don't. This is that age-old polar combat. It's a spiritual combat. Good versus evil. Light versus dark. There's nothing new here. The consciousness that we need to do, the consciousness changes we need to make, have to start at those 1/10 of a degree shifts that we make every day. That we teach all of those around us to make every day. That we teach our children to make every day. we teach our friends, we teach our fellow members in our school to do every day. I've been very pleased to see some of Bonnie's kids, her boys, making really sound changes over the time that we've known, that I've known. She's known them all her life. Without picking on anyone, it was fun watching Sean go from learning about gardening with us. You know, what do I got to do this for? And then a year later, he's like, wow. And now he's up in Portland building gardens. That core foundational level of the Toltec philosophy of life, this spiritual connection with the planet, is that ability to feed ourselves and our society. That's step one. It's acknowledging this higher spiritual purpose behind doing all of this. That's some of what we have to do, is we have to take people and we educate them and we keep shining our light. Some people might need it turned on a little bit brighter. And rather than just a nice big floodlight off over there, maybe they need a hard spotlight shine right in their eyes to convince them to go elsewhere or to wake up. And so your perception of who's talking to you, a lot of times that's going to be the universe shining that spotlight right in your eyes, figuratively or even literally, saying, wake up, are you on the right path? Are you really sure you're on the right path? Are you really sure you're awake? So that's some of the work we're going to be doing this weekend and continuing on an ongoing basis.
We did this expo craft fair last weekend, and what's nice is you have a chance to talk to a lot of people. We're talking to them about the Kadua, so you get information from them as far as what they're looking at. It was amazing to me, like how many people have been drawn to using energy for healing or whatever it is they want to use energy for, and yet have gone years without doing anything because they're afraid to choose the wrong healing modality, And so on one hand, I think that, we look at things, as if we're not going to be able to make a change later if we've made the wrong choice, but also that we're giving more importance to tools than to the education. So in other words, it's not whether you pick Reiki or Kadua or, Hands of Light or whatever, it's a tool that's going to get you started using energy because that was your goal. It doesn't mean that's the only thing you can ever use. It doesn't mean that you won't be able to switch later on. It doesn't mean anything. But, to wait years to do any of it just simply because you're afraid to make a decision on where to start shows you how we don't ever cross that rainbow bridge at all. We never get out of this like horizontal path of collecting different things. And but it, you made the connection in the end, kind of bringing it back to how does all that relate to where we're at and what we're doing here today, because we may not know what our will is. We may not know which path we ultimately want to take. We don't even know whether we care about saving the world or whether we believe in this consciousness stuff or anything. But until we start and engage in it, we'll never know. And I think there's a point. Some of the stuff that we're gonna teach at the consciousness class this weekend is stuff that actually used to be in the Akadwa manual, but it was a little more on the spiritual end, and so we took it out because it doesn't really apply to everybody who just wants to do healing. But the point is that after doing these exercises for years, at some point when you start to do it, it feels more real than your regular life. It's making these connections to something higher, and it's by repetition and doing them over and over again. And I can't tell you how many exercises and tools we've been given through Coyote School. Nobody ever does them again. I mean, there's ones I've got them in a journal written. I remember them every once in a while. I might do them a couple times a month or something, but I haven't made them part of my personal practice, so I'm not going to necessarily get the benefits of that exercise unless I embrace it and do something with it. I also noticed, I think sometimes we have this aversion to the word work, because of the way we understand it physically in the world. But I think it's important to look at this as going to college. If you enroll in a college class and you paid for it, there's motivation to go and engage with it and study and practice and take the tests and get the credit for the class. And even if we just do that in small bits, whatever it is, today I'm going to be conscious of my languaging and the things that I say. So in one way, a self-driven path is harder because you don't have somebody over you telling you this is what you've got to be doing. It's your choosing, it's your will to do an exercise or to examine it or to test it to see if it works. And all I can say is that over time it will pay off, but you got to start somewhere and you got to engage.
Any questions? Any questions from anyone online?
Not that I see yet.
Do we have anybody online tonight?
One year.
Okay. Well, then we're going to stop here.
We got announcements.
Oh, wait, we're going to have announcements. And then we'll stop. Let's have some announcements. Anybody have announcements?
Well, you've given homework before, so I didn't know if you wanted to follow up on the reading. We did a little bit in the beginning, and then also I think there was an exercise about seeing if you were awake, whether anybody has done that, or whether you wanted to comment on any of that.
Yeah, let me start there. We're going to be starting to go through this book and talking about it roughly in order. Basically, you've got chapter 1, overview. So for next week, whether you're logging in remotely or watching it later, do start to read E.J. Gould's The Human Biological Machine as a Transformational Apparatus. One of the exercises I know that I've given and we've not followed up on, but we're going to in the future, is the exercise of knowing what your intent is for everything you do. And to spend some time, spend a few days, keeping a log, keep that journal with you and say, okay, I'm going to do this task. Why? What is my intent? What do I hope to accomplish? Well, I'm really hungry and my biological machine will die if I don't have food in the next 5 minutes. Oh, okay, that's a good intent. Avoid dying. So do that all day long, every day for a week. And keep track of this. And at the end of the day, you realize, oh man, 3/4 of what I did today, I forgot to write down an intent. So there's an intent exercise. Reading EJ's book exercise. Every time we do these little tasks and we complete them successfully, We're building personal power. You're adding more to your reservoir. That process starts to create connections in your nervous system and in your higher bodies that enables you to do more and gives you more capabilities. Did you think to use the Akadwa today? Did I turn it on when I did whatever I was going to do with an intent? Or did I neglect that step? So read AJ's book, do the intent exercise. Any other announcements?
So we have the new summer newsletter that was sent in an email. If we do have hard copies, if you want it, and that has the events for the summer. We have the Labyrinth project that we're doing at Glen Haven. There is an information sheet about that, about what Glen Haven is, about what it's been, what it's going to become. And essentially, because of the drought a few years ago, we let the Labyrinth gardens die back. And now that we've downsized our farm, we would like to get the Labyrinth active again, so that the school can use it, and we can use it for different ceremonies and things. We're personally going to be working on that on Tuesdays and Wednesdays every week until solstice in June. Which case and there is the weekend before that, there is a shamanic arts weekend. So anyway, next weekend, which is the 19th, I believe, there was scheduled an Akadwa consciousness class. That's going to be a free informational introduction to the consciousness work. So we have 3 doorways now into the Akadwa work. Originally we were working with healing, spirituality, which includes shamanism work, and now the consciousness work. And so remember that even if you, may not personally be interested in this, this is a good opportunity for anyone that you might want to recommend this work to, because A, it's not going to be slanted one way or another with the past, and it's going to be something that everyone can use. And so we're going to be doing some of the practical work in the Labyrinth. But if you can't make it next weekend, we are going to be working on this weekly up through the solstice. And then I think it's the 16th of June, which is a Saturday, when there's another shamanic arts weekend where we're going to be doing some stuff in the area, but we're going to begin and end at the Labyrinth. So be sure and let us know if you're going to make any of these events too, so that we can get a count of who's going to be there.
Let me just say, before you go on with any other announcements, that this Saturday's event would be a good time for people who, if you've been wanting to invite someone here and Monday nights aren't convenient, that this coming Saturday would be a good day. The time for students to get there to do some preparatory activities is 7 a.m. start time, 8:30 for the public, and the public section will wrap up around 3:30 or 4.
And it's not public, it's guests.
Guests.
Invited guests, yeah.
By public, I mean not members of the school. People are not yet students, but who may be interested. Maybe they will never become members of the school or students. They aren't healers, but they are interested in doing higher level consciousness work for themselves or whatever organizations they're in. This would be a good time to invite those kinds of people.
It's also a good time for families.
Families, bring your kids. They can run around our fields and get dirty and all that good stuff that kids do on farms. Then on that June date, that is one that is strongly recommended for all the students to plan for and be at. That June 16th, I think it is. And that one is going to be for students only. But all these other Tuesdays and Wednesdays where we'll be working on the labyrinth, all are welcome. That'll be a good time for everyone. Look at the calendar that Bonnie's passing out, or
You
pick
guys
one.
have one, right? Or do
You
want
all
it?
probably have one.
You want one, Ken?
I have.
You have it?
We have a variety of dates coming up. This next week, Monday, will be another discussion here. And then due to weather, we are going to be moving the broadcast location up to Mount Shasta, starting in June. It gets hot in Reading. Probably okay in Red Bluff, but here in Reading it gets hot. And so that's what we're gonna do. I realize not everybody might make it every week, but do try to tune in and do try to come as often as you can. Any other announcements?
Yeah. So as he was saying, this is next Monday is the last Golden Eagle discourse here at the Southstein Center and in Reading for the summer. And June in particular, I think we only have a couple dates for discussions in June because we're going to be traveling. So I think there's only 2 dates for discussions. So those will be online if you can't make it to Mount Shasta. Just a little advice about watching online is take it seriously as if you're here. So be there when you're online. So you can even set the space, set an altar if you want, try to eliminate distractions and things so that you can focus on the discussion, because it can be, you can still receive the radiations and the downloads and things even if you're not physically here, but you have to be mentally, emotionally, spiritually there as well. And so whether you're watching it live or whether you're watching a past discussion, try to create that space and hold the space while you're watching the discussion, because it's really helpful. And then also, if everyone, whether you're watching online on a regular basis or not, if you could go in and make sure you know how to find it on YouTube and like our channel, because we need to get X amount of likes before we can get our own name and so forth on the channel. And then also, if you've never registered for an account with YouTube, if you need to do that to be able to comment online live. And we do welcome your online comments, so be sure, if you're watching, to ask questions. So the next Akadua class is June 2nd. It's a Saturday. That will be an advanced healing course. You should at least have level 1 to attend that, and know that we're going to be covering some advanced techniques. So if you've never taken one of our healing courses, there'll be a little bit of introduction, but we are going to be jumping into more advanced techniques than what our previous level 1 and 2 classes ever contained. And so again, be sure and let us know, because space will be limited for that. Then we already pretty much talked about the Shamanic Arts weekend on the 16th, and we'll probably be gone the last 2 weeks in July or June, so there won't be any broadcasts then. And then just a reminder to everybody, be sure and check out the new websites. If you haven't, go through them in detail, because there's a lot of new information and contacts, and it's a good point to understand the whole of what we're trying to present and what questions you might have might get answered there, or might trigger questions that you can ask at these discussions. And so there's the akadewahealing.com website, which is been completely redone. The Toltec Shamanic Arts is actually kind of a porthole into 4 different websites, but it includes the Golden Eagle Discourse or shamanic work. And then also I have a page called the Hearthfire Path, and I just wanted to say a little bit about that. When we're looking at the Tree of Life, the Pillar of Mercy is that left-hand path. It's the feminine path, the raising of energy rather than bringing it down. And that information is covered in the Pillar of Mercy site, which is linked through the Toltec Shamanic Arts porthole. There's also a Facebook site for, is it called Golden Eagle Discourses?
The Golden Eagle Discourses is the Facebook
site.
site for my shamanic work. That's what is yours?
It's called the Pillar of Mercy.
The Pillar of Mercy also. Okay.
What I wanted to say specifically about the Pillar of Mercy Facebook site is that it talks a lot about the Hearthfire Path work, which is about making your home a temple by bridging that your spiritual and your physical life. And maybe you don't feel like you can go out and do some hardcore spiritual work because you've got a job and a family and all these other obligations. So it's how to integrate that work in the meantime, so that you don't have to wait 20 years to start your path. And specifically, the Facebook site for the Pillar of Mercy is based off of some of the work by a good friend of ours named Aya Tarlow, who passed away a few years ago. She wrote this book called The Way of the Warrior Priestess, and it's an excellent book if you're interested in this kind of work. And she has covered very well a lot of the principles that we talk about and teach, even though it wasn't specifically related to the Toltec path. The Toltec teachings are in here. And so what I do on the Facebook site and on some of the blogs that come from the Pillar of Mercy website is I'm going through this book myself and pulling out some of the lessons kind of in a chronological order as I go through the book. So if you're interested in going through this book with me, and that can maybe spur some other discussions and some questions as well. But this is more slanted towards the left-hand path Pillar of Mercy. So and then we had a tentative movie night planned.
Oh yeah.
How's that looking as far as that's still
25th.
on? The 25th of May. So that is a private location and private invitation. But let us know if you're planning on coming, and we'll give you all the secret directions.
So yeah, we say private because we don't want to put the address out publicly. But if you would like to attend and you're either a student, you're invited, you can bring anyone you think will be open to using some of this esoteric knowledge to analyze the world around us. The movie we're going to be watching on the 25th is called Gattaca. Gattaca, I believe.
And if you can't, well, I guess it's not. The discussion won't be live.
No,
I was
there
going to
won't
say, if
be.
you can't be there, you can also watch the movie and post questions on the Facebook site or something.
We might be able to go live if we'll talk about the technical details of what's required for that. So we may be able to broadcast live this time. I think we might have that figured out. So, okay. Any other comments or questions? All right. Thank you very much for tuning in, and we are going to go offline.